All right, let's sort of go over what graphing inequalities is. I know you guys watched a video yesterday, but I want to give you some more notes just in case you were a little bit confused. So basically, when you're graphing an inequality, the first thing I hope you picked up on was you are going to have, if you have a less than or equal than sign, you'll use an open circle. You'll use an open circle. And you're going to use that open circle to show that that does not include whatever number is on there. So for example, if I had something like x is greater than 2, well, my first thought is, okay, if I want to graph this, I need to draw a number line. I want to plot the number I am showing, so there's 2, and then I always show something to the left and to the right, just for context, just to help me kind of understand where I'm at on my number line. And so then I want to think about, okay, x, well, actually first, the next step is going to be looking at your sign. Is this a open or closed circle? This is going to be a open circle because I am not including 2. So I draw my open circle on 2. And then I think, are all of my values of x going to be less than or greater than 2? Well, this right now is telling me x is greater than 2. So all the values have to be greater than 2, but can they equal 2? No, they have to be greater than 2. So x is any value that's greater than 2. So that's how I can show it there. The other type that I have is, let's say I have a less than or equal to, or a greater than or equal to. Well, in this case, I'm going to use a closed circle, because what does this mean? This tells me that I'm including the number. So if this were to say x is greater than or equal to 2, well, that tells me that x could equal 2. So I'm going to shade in my circle. So x can equal 2, or any of the values greater than 2. So for some examples, it'll give you a graph and say, let's practice writing my graph as an inequality. So I've already written out number 1. And so here, if I'm looking at this, I'm noticing the first thing is, so I'll use x to represent all of my value that is unknown. So x can be anything that's going to be less than 1. So already I know that x, all the values, these are all the values that are, if I were to say this is like a -3, here's like 0, all of my values are less than 1. So x has to be less than 1. Can x equal 1? No, it's an open circle, so I know it's just a less than sign. So that would be my answer. Let's do another example. Example number 2. Let's say I have a very similar thing, but let's say at 1, I have a closed circle, so x could be 1, or it could be, again, I'm going this way. What are some ways? There's actually a couple different ways I can write this. If I use language, I could say x is at most 1. So this is where we use that language that's in your cheat sheet. Or x can be no greater than 1. And to write this using an inequality, I can say x has to be less than or equal to 1. X is going to be less than 1, but it could also be equal to. So the only difference is I want to add that little extra line right underneath. Let's do one more. So I hope you're writing these down as we go along. So now I have another number line. I have at -4, a closed circle, meaning my value can equal -4, and I'm going in this direction, meaning all of my values are larger than -4. So this would be -3, this would be -2, here would be -5. Again, it just gives me some context. So I'm thinking right now, x, and I have -4. So I think x can be equal to -4, or x has to be greater. X is going to be greater than -4. So that is how I will represent that. X is a value that is equal to or greater than -4. It could be all these values. And you could plug some in and think, is, let's see, is -3 greater than or equal to -4? Yes, it is greater. -3 is greater than -4. All right, let's try to practice some graphing ones together. Okay. So the last thing you'll be asked to do is to graph. Graph the inequality. So you'll be given something like, let's start off with an easy one. A is greater than 4. So to graph this, my first step, I want to draw my number line. I want to plot where my number is that I'm talking about. So here's 4. And to give some context, I can say here's 0, here's 8. And now I need to show A can be any number greater than 4. So I find where is my number? Here's 4. Is it an open or closed circle? Open. And I'm representing A is all the values greater than 4. So 5 is greater than 4. So I could have, that could be represent 5 all the way to really, it goes on forever. So here's how I would represent that. A is going to be all of my values greater than 4. Example 2. Let's say I have 3 is greater than or equal to x. So now x is on this side. So we're used to most of the time our variable comes first. Well, it doesn't really matter. As long as you're thinking about what these inequality signs are telling you, you should be fine. So again, I draw my number line. I want to graph x as a value. So here's 3. I'm going to graph 3. I'll say that this is 1. This is 5. And I want to say, is this an open or closed circle? This is a closed circle. So x can equal 3. Or, well, if 3 is greater than or equal to x, this is telling me that if 3 has to be greater than or equal to x, another way to think about this is then x has to be less than or equal to 3. So don't let that confuse you, but you can think of it like that. Instead of 3 is greater than or equal to x, that means that x has to be smaller than 3. Right now, this is saying that x is smaller than 3, or it could be equal to 3. X is less than or equal to 3. So with this, I have a closed circle, and I'm going to show that all of the values, 3 is greater than or equal to all of what x could be. Let's try one more. I'll just do it on this page. All right, example 3. Let's say I have 0 is greater than or equal, 0 is less than or equal to x. Well, the first thing I'll do is I'll draw my number line. I'll want to plot, here's 0, so this would be -1, this would be 1. And x, well, I think first, is this an open or closed circle? It's a closed circle. I'm going to use red, sorry. Closed circle on 0. And x is going to be greater than or equal to 0. So 0 is less than x. Another way of writing this is I could say x is, and I can switch my sign. So I know that 0 is less than x. So 0 has to be less than x. Therefore, x has to be greater than or equal to 0. So since 0 has to be smaller than x, x has to be anything greater than 0. So I could point it this way. Again, they're not necessarily super difficult, but they do require you to kind of stop and think about what the inequality sign is telling you. Hopefully this helps. We'll review a little bit more tomorrow. Good luck with your homework, and video chat me. Let me know if you have any questions.